How important is balance in the grand scheme of things? So just a heads up, normally before I record these videos, I have sort of a general idea of what direction I want to go in, a few specific key arguments I want to make. Today, no. It's just a topic that I was discussing earlier today, and so I want to talk some more about it. Balance in tabletop RPGs is a tricky subject because what does it even mean? What does it mean? A lot of people have different ideas about what it means to have a balanced game, how much balance is required, and does too much balance mean something bad? So for me, I want to lay down some groundwork here. For me, a balanced tabletop RPG, what I'm asking for when I say I want to play a more balanced game, is that I want the major character archetypes in the game to all be viable. They don't need to be perfectly equal. It just needs to have a situation where, like, you know, the top tier characters and the bottom tier characters can work together, and the bottom tier characters are not going to feel useless. The top tier characters are not going to absolutely outshine everybody. If you can accomplish that, you have a well-balanced RPG. It doesn't need to be perfect. A lot of people say that a perfectly balanced RPG is impossible and would be boring. I don't necessarily agree with that. Because here's the thing, perfectly balanced does not mean perfectly identical. Oftentimes when people say this, I think they're referring to the sort of homogeneity of abilities that would be required for a perfectly balanced RPG. I think that's not necessarily true. You don't have to have all classes be the same or all character types. Because, like, we're not just talking about D&D here. We're talking about all RPGs. So not just classes, character archetypes, the character types, your different options that you have when making a character. They don't all have to be the same for them to be balanced. And the primary way that as a designer you would go about making them different but fair is to have different roles. And we get back to what I've already talked about, the importance of roles in the design of an RPG. You got to know what characters are supposed to be doing, and making it so that no one character can accomplish everything means that even very powerful characters might rely on other characters, powerful or not, in order for the party as a whole to come out ahead and achieve that victory. That is why perfect balance, I think, is technically achievable. But is it desirable? Is it necessary? I would say categorically it is not necessary. I have not played a game that I would call perfectly balanced, as all things should be. 4th edition, you all know, I'm a big fan of 4th edition, is well balanced. It is not perfectly balanced. There are certainly, like, tiers of character classes. I couldn't recite to you what they are because that doesn't matter to me in that game. It's balanced well enough that I don't care which one is technically above another. You know, is the barbarian technically a bad striker? Maybe, but it's close enough. It's close enough that it can hold its own weight. Even as a low-tier striker, it's still going to accomplish its goal and can still hang with the big boys. So you have different levels of balance. You know, Pathfinder 2nd edition is lauded as quite well balanced. I don't like that game because for other reasons. I think it has a problem with repetitiveness. I think too many abilities are at will, and you need more resources to care about. But that's like a video for another time. The point is that Pathfinder is quite well balanced, according to basically everyone that I've talked to on the subject. But that doesn't make it a perfect game. And I don't think its high degree of balance is at fault for the things that I don't like about it. I think they are completely separate issues. So you can have a well-balanced game where characters are not all the same, which means that you don't have the homogeneity problem. I don't think that an exceedingly high degree of balance necessitates the game being boring. I disagree with that. But I do think that it is perhaps not worth, like, it's not worth focusing on, becoming hyper-focused on it as a game designer. When the D&D Next surveys first came out at the end of the life of 4th edition, they asked, like, how, at your table, how important is balance to you? I recall giving a lower answer than I would give today, knowing what I know now about what their agenda was for that. I think they were looking for permission to just sort of dump game balance down the drain and say, oh, balance doesn't matter, which is where we are with 5th edition. I think they were looking for permission to do that. Nowadays, I would rate the value of balance in a game as being quite high. I rated it as lower than I would now because I thought, well, 4E is quite tight with its math. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be quite that tight. It can loosen up a bit, 10%, 20% at most. And I was looking specifically at the Essentials classes, which are not terribly well balanced. In particular, the non-casters don't scale well past the heroic tier. Again, foreshadowing for what Merles was going to do with 5th edition. And I remember thinking, like, that's probably, like, baseline. And surely they're asking about, like, normal 4E content. Like, sure, if you want to do Essentials, I can live with Essentials characters. It's good. Good enough, anyways. And had that been the case, I think I wouldn't be making anti-5th edition content now. I wouldn't be going back to, looking to run 4th edition games. I wouldn't be quite so anti-D&D as I am if they'd been more honest, I think, about what they were trying to accomplish. Well, no, not even if they'd been more honest, because I don't like what they were trying to accomplish. If they were using what they implied, what they strongly implied in the surveys, and, like, we want, to be about where we are with Essentials, we want to have that level of balance going forward. I think if that was true, I think I would still be playing 5th edition and still be quite happy about it. It doesn't need to be perfect. I don't know that this is necessarily any, like, tremendous value, because there's a certain baseline level of balance that you want. You want to make sure everyone is viable at all levels of play, at all levels of optimization, but it doesn't need to go much beyond that. Like, going a little bit beyond that to make it well balanced, sure. And then you can get a reputation for being well balanced, as Pathfinder has, but you don't need to go too far. I'm getting very distracted right now thinking about like the different games and the different balance levels and, like, how to even describe and define it. So I'm kind of going on a windy trail of thought here. Because I understand that Pathfinder is coming out with, like, an update to their rules. They may become, and like, maybe they're shoring up little mathematical oddities and discrepancies here and there. I don't think that level of dedication to balance is really necessary. And certainly there are games out there that don't really, like, the term balance doesn't really even apply per se. Because not all RPGs are about overcoming obstacles. They're about other things. Is Legend of the Five Rings balanced? I would say probably not. I don't think it's a particularly well-balanced game, but that's fine because it's not about everyone joining together and addressing obstacles as a group necessarily. And if it is, you can certainly build a party that is balanced together, but what it's about is, like, the drama and the story and the struggles of individual characters, their inner troubles. And those are things that, like, you don't have to have levels of power to deal with. So you can write RPGs where balance isn't even a factor. But if you're going to do a D&D-esque game where it's a party of adventurers or heroes going and overcoming obstacles, overcoming challenges, defeating monsters, they are all working towards the same goal and assumed to be united in that cause. You want everyone to feel useful, right? D&D is supposed to be a power fantasy. You want everyone to feel useful, and to do that, you need a certain baseline of power that is viable with, and I'll get to viable in just a moment, it is viable with even the highest optimized character possible, barring unforeseen combos. You know, I'm not counting, like, you know, oh, they took these two abilities that interact in this odd way, and now you have a character that's way more powerful than anything we've intended. I'm not even counting that. That's just design flaws. That happens. It's forgivable. I'm talking about, like, the highest level of intended power. That's like, if you take all the best options and you play your character really well and you make all the really strong, good decisions, you will be high-level optimizer. If you just sort of take whatever feels good at the moment with no greater plan, no eye for synergy, you're going to be low-level optimizer. These two characters in a well-designed game should be able to hang together, and they should both contribute meaningfully to whatever the obstacle is that you're trying to overcome. It's not the case in 5th edition. You can easily make a useless character in 5e. Not as easily as in 3rd edition. In 3rd edition, it was so easy to make a useless character, you had to actively avoid it. Especially as the levels got higher. Like, by the time you hit, like, 7th level, if you don't have a build, you're not hanging with anybody. What do I mean by viable? Viable, I mean, I was just talking about it kind of. Viable does not mean, like, it can do a thing, because anything's viable in that definition. You know, the melee monk can walk up and just auto attack, and he will do some damage. That's viable in that regard. What I mean when I say viable is, I mean that you are pulling your weight. You're able to justify your existence in the party as opposed to being a different character, you know? And I'm not even talking about, like, well, why don't just play a wizard? Everyone should just be a wizard because the wizards are the best at everything. That's true, but it's beside the point. We're talking about, like, normal levels of optimization. You know, if I'm going to have a martial character who is throwing down X amount of damage per round, you know, averaged out over a certain number of rounds, I should be able to compare myself to, say, a warlock, and our number should be pretty similar, because a warlock is also doing the same thing that I am, at will damage every round, and we should be doing about the same amount because we have very similar jobs. And so that's what I mean by viable. Viable means you should be close to whatever the baseline is for your particular job, be it at will damage, crowd control, utility, whatever it may be, damage mitigation. These are jobs that exist in 5e, sort of nebulously defined jobs, because, again, like, can't be party roles. That's 4th edition. Can't do that. But anyways, so what I'm getting at is that balance as a construct in tabletop RPGs is important. It is more important, I think, than most people realize. It is not the be-all, end-all. It is not the most important thing. And it is certainly something that a specific RPG can be designed to not require and not really be of value. But that's not generally the case, especially with D&D and D&D-esque RPGs. In those, balance is very important. And you often don't even notice how well balanced something is or isn't until you start to look at the math. And it's And you can't just look at any one aspect either. You can't just look at damage output, obviously, because not every character deals damage. That's not every character's job. Most characters' job. And it's certainly part of something that nearly all characters are going to be doing. But I think I've said my piece. Balance is very important, more important than most people realize. And I'm hoping passively, not really actively, like I'm not putting my heart out there, but I do genuinely hope that when 6th edition comes around, they realize this. And they realize that owning a calculator in your designer's office is probably a good idea. Because, man, it sucks to have a character that's useless. I've done it on purpose and accidentally. Being useless is a bad feeling in D&D. It's so bad. Especially when, well, maybe I'll make a separate video on that specific topic. But yeah, it's important to write your game in a way that makes every character feel good about the decisions that they make. And some games do that better than others.